Well, season's dead. Season's officially dead. It's dead. It's on the table. The 2021, 2020. We had a lot of high expectations for the season, but right now, I'm looking down. Season's on the morgue table. So what do? You do an autopsy. You try to go over things. You try to see what caused the death of the season. You see what you could do to make sure things can get better. And my mortician that I'm going to bring in, my expert mortician, sorry to describe you like that, Jake Burns. Always a pleasure to have you on here, man. How you doing?
My pleasure to be here, man. I'm good, thank you.
All right. Well, we gotta look at this thing. I think we can look at some of the stuff that worked. I think defensively, I think that went right on track, right? I think we kind of assumed, hey, this defense is gonna have some problems early part of this season, but they should get things together. And then by the end of this season, we're gonna really see what we wanted. I think, given the fact that they were down to like MJ Stewart, lost a lot of safeties at the end of the year, lost
Yeah.
a lot of guys in that secondary. They played very well. They're deep there. Andrew Berry's found a way to just keep replenishing the bottom of the roster, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Going into next year, since they did have a lot of 1-year deals, how confident are you that the defense is going to be able to maintain that level of play?
I think a lot of it comes down to replacing or keeping Jadeveon Clowney and keeping a pass rush formidable. I don't think it's any secret that they didn't get a ton from the interior between Malik Jackson and then Malik McDowell faded. It faded pretty heavily toward the end of the year. They really have some questions in the middle, but if they can keep a good group on the edge, whether that's Clowney or adding somebody else or drafting somebody in the first 2 rounds, I think that can work out for them. They need somebody formidable next to Miles. I don't think that's any secret. And they need to figure out a third guy. I think we can all agree Takk McKinley was a really nice threat. So they got to keep that group together, because what I think Quincy's going on is they have a really good back group. Like their linebacker group, Jacob Phillips, JOK. I think you can keep Anthony Walker or supplement another player in there. Sione Taki's a nice Sam. And then their secondary's pretty good. They go 4 deep at corner between Greedy and AJ Green as the backups, for Denzel and Greg Newsome. Greg Newsome's got some inside flexibility. He played, all these games. Troy Hill was hurt. If Greg Newsome was healthy, he was playing inside, and he's proven to have that flexibility. The safety room, I think MJ Stewart really stepped up to show he could be a formidable part of it. And people forget Richard LeCounte had some nice reps at the end of the year too, to go along with John Johnson, obviously Grant Delpit. They got a really nice group at linebacker, core group at linebacker, and in the secondary. If they can figure out the answer opposite Miles, another depth piece at DN behind them, and then add something. I know you can't spend every position, can't have high dollar value players, but they do need to add something. Either get Jordan Elliott or Tommy Togiai to figure it out a little bit here, or add something more formidable in that D tackle group, because then Malik Jackson's not going to be back. You're talking about those 1-year deals. I can't envision a path where he's back. He just didn't play well enough to justify it. And Malik McDowell is a nice player in terms of a great story, coming back from the things that he needed to recover from and doing a great job with it, but he just faded toward the end of the year. So maybe some conditioning happens for him this year to next year that helps with some of that stuff, but I'm not as encouraged as I was early in the year. I was really, really encouraged by what he's doing. He ended up being a pretty horrific run defender, but a decent pass rush guy. So I do think there's a future because he can rush the passer a little bit, but they need something better inside. So I don't know if that's in the mid rounds of the draft they're going to try to address it. I would think they would go into free agency trying to figure out something along the defensive tackle group, because you really don't want to bring in another young name there. But to answer the crux of your question, I feel pretty good about the defense in terms of keeping the majority of the guys around. Continuity is king in the NFL, in my opinion. So I know Joe Woods has been uneven, but I thought they really progressed late in the year. And I think keeping continuity within a system, verbiage, concepts, all aligned. A huge reason, if you listen to people talk out in Arizona about Vance Joseph and his third year, the third year stuff helps, man. Getting guys, familiar with the scheme, like we said, getting your play caller familiar with things, getting your green dot situation figured out for who's calling those plays, the checks that come within certain coverages. You know what I'm saying? How you slide fronts to certain formations. It's all very much repetition based. The more you're in a defense, the better you're going to be at doing that stuff on the fly. And I thought they got really, really good at it by the end of the year. And I don't think it's any secret to say that if the Browns offense was remotely respectable, the defense was playing well enough that they were going to the playoffs. So, I don't know if it's a Super Bowl defense. I'm not sitting here saying that, But I do think if you keep progressing, Delpit gets better, makes a jump. JOK makes a jump. Jacob Phillips can stay healthy. You get Denzel to be the guy you think he can be. He's really, I mean, he's going to get a contract like he's there. He's been playing elite football. Greg Newsome, Greedy's coming back playing a little better than we expected him to coming off that injury. You know, we think AJ Green might be a player there too. So there's a lot of pieces, man. It could be a Super Bowl caliber defense in year 3 for Joe Woods.
Yeah, I mean, when you have Myles Garrett, there's always the bet that he can just pop off and have another Myles Garrett type year there. My question about Clowney, real quick, is I think he's in an interesting spot, right? Because he's going to be 29 when he hits free agency this time. Has the most sacks he's had since he was a big free agency target when 2017. But he has an injury history on him, and at an older age, I think that's something that he can't shake off when it comes to what he can demand in the free market. How do you think that's going to affect his value? Like, do you think it's going to be somewhere around where it was last year, or do you think it's going to be like significantly higher? People are going to give him long-term offers.
I don't know that it'll be significantly higher. I do think he has something better to take to the table, to your point. Like, hey, man, I had 9 sacks, clearly put on the pressures this year. Run defense was still top notch. But you're right. He's got a 29-year-old. He came off of a healthy year. As a franchise, going to be willing to put 3 years behind that? I don't know, man. I think I could see Cleveland putting a couple and an option for a third, just because of the continuity and those two really liking each other, him and Myles. I could see something where that can work out for both sides. Myles' deal's set to kick in. I don't think this year, but the next year. So maybe they could give Clowney a heavy front-loaded contract, do something really nice for him with the signing bonus in the first year, and then kind of have a voidable situation late in the contract. Just something to think about. I think Cleveland is a spot he liked because he doesn't have that pressure of being the guy to carry a defensive line in terms of pressure production. But he's going to listen to other offers, so Cleveland can't come in and lowball him. I don't think that that's going to be good for anybody involved there. But like to your point, I don't see 15 teams coming to offer multi-year contracts. Like, somebody might, but again, if that somebody is, I don't know, a team like, trying to think off the top of my head, I'm not even sure. Somewhere that it has
it
to
would have
carry
to
him.
be a win now team, right? Because he can't be waiting for the future. He's not like 26 anymore. Right?
Yeah, he'd have to get blown away by the money. But again, I don't know where his money situation sits. He never really got that huge contract, so maybe he is chasing dollar value. I'm not sure. All I know is this: it sounded like he really enjoyed his time in Cleveland. He fit the defense really well. I would hope that Cleveland makes him a good offer. That's kind of where I'm hoping it sits. If they can make him a good offer, I really do see a path to come back. I don't think they have to overpay for him by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think they need to give him a good offer, and he'll consider it. I think he wants to be here.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see here. All right, let's talk about special teams real quick. I think special teams has been an experience this year. I think defensively, on the coverages, they've been fine, but I think that's a kind of a credit to the depth there on some level. But they had like JOK out there at the beginning of the year on those kickoff coverages. It's like kind of overkill. But I think really the issues have been the return game, just inconsistency. I know what Prefer said that the return game was better than last year, but it's still like we don't really trust that return game.
Yeah.
And then the kicking woes, the punter woes, the kicking woes. It's just been an issue here for quite a while. Do you see that being something to where it puts kind of Prefer on the hot seat a little bit, because it's been a couple of years now?
Yeah, I'll put it this way. I'm of the thought with special teams coaches that they don't really do much. They don't have a huge impact. You either can kick it at 20 plus years old, or you can't. Like, your special teams coach isn't giving your kicker and punter very many instructions. Those guys get private coaching. Like, they can either do it or they can't do it. You need to find a better punter. Like, it's embarrassing the punters they were putting on the field at times this year. No offense. I just thought that you could see the writing on the wall last year with Jamie Gillen. He was way too inconsistent. Cole Quit, an older guy. Now, I know they wanted to get J.K. Scott in, the kid from Alabama, a few years back, but I think he was unvaccinated, and there was a whole hiccup with that. They got to find someone who can punt it, like flat out punt it and flat out kick field goals. Like, there's no way around it. You're not really getting. I mean, like, I read at one point, Prefer's point to, what's his name? McLaughlin was like, he's got to keep his head down. Well, that's like the most simple thing you tell a kicker, man. Keep your head down. It's like a golfer. Keep your head down. Like, they just don't. They don't teach them anything. They know what they're supposed to do. They got it. Your special team. It's the same with return guys. Like, you either have dudes who can handle it or they can't. And if DPJ was the best punt return guy they could find, they got to solve that. They got to solve that in the draft with a player who can be an end of the wide receiver group or cornerback group player. He can also return punts effectively. Like, they got to get better at that. I think the kick return situation was decent this year. Not great, but decent. It's usually a nice role for a third running back like Dearness Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
But what you look at is, with special teams guys, how much does the coach trust them? Are they getting the right people in the right places at the right time? I think Prefer's okay at that. Anytime that Stefanski's had to step away, he's trusted him to be the head coach. That matters. It does matter a little bit. There's a lot of things like with I mean, what was his name? Was it Chris Tabor, who was in Cleveland for like 32 years? Like, just you either you're either helping the head coach or you're not. The head coach really only knows that answer. There's no doubt the Browns have to be better, but I think if the personnel can get better in those spots, the special teams can improve a little bit. So I'm not all too worried, but I could see them moving on. I do know that that's Stefanski's guy. They've been together for all those years in Minnesota, so it's hard to see them moving on, but I could see it being justifiable to get a different special teams voice in, considering where they finished. But I would, to be honest, I'd be a little surprised if they actually did end up pulling the trigger on some kind of move there. But I think you got to help them out. You got to get somebody in the kicking game, those guys who can make a difference. You got to acquire somebody, I don't know who. I'm not trying to be the guy who has all the answers behind a computer screen, but the personnel has to be better in terms of the kicking aspect. And then, you need to find somebody who can actually evoke some confidence in punt return and stuff. Like, I like Donovan a lot, but I don't like him as a punt returner. I don't like him as a kick returner. Like, it's just not going to be his thing in the NFL. So I hope they can find some people that mesh that personnel a little bit better and can make a difference there to get them out of the 20s range in special teams. Because I'm with you, it's a problem. They got to work to fix it collectively.
Yeah, and speaking of Donovan Peoples-Jones, I think that's going to be our segue into the offense. Now, before we get into the big stuff, right? And I think everybody wants to talk about the quarterback position when it comes to the offense, and I think that's the hot topic. One thing I do want to talk about, and one thing I've been talking about for a little bit here that I think is kind of going under the radar, is how Chris Hubbard getting hurt early in the year kind of threw a lot of the contingency plans for the offensive line out of whack. And then you had to put like Blake Hance out there right tackle for a while until you felt like I forget his name, but the guy out of Cincinnati was ready. James Hudson. Yeah, James Hudson was ready. And he played well at the end of the year. Yeah. Of course, minus the TJ Watt fiasco. But that's TJ Watt. He does that to a lot of guys in the league. But yeah, I think that's one of the things that kind of threw this whole thing out of whack a little bit. Obviously, there are other things. You think really like losing, like one Jedrick going down pretty much at the same time that Jack went down, and then also not having Chris Hubbard. I mean, Chris Hubbard was essentially like the backup for like 4 different positions on that offensive line. Yeah.
He played guard a good amount of 2020 as well. People forget that.
He had a lot of injuries in 2020 with the offensive line that he was able to plug into.
Yeah, so you're spot on about that. Early in the season, when you lose not only when you lose Jed to an ankle right off the bat, you then lose Hubbard the next week. Then you're like, okay, so we got to figure out right tackle. We're going to play the young guy we drafted because we really don't want to move anybody else out of position. People forget Blake Hance, who played the significant amount at right tackle. He's a guard. Like, he's a guard. They were giving him center snaps some in the preseason too. Like, he's not a tackle. So yeah, you were down to games with a third tackle, a guy you took in the 4th round who's clearly not ready. And go look at people don't people getting on James Hudson's case like he's Austin Corbett or Cam Irving. Like, this guy was taken in the 4th round. Go look at the people selected around him at the tackle position in the NFL draft. None of them are performing that well. Okay. It's hard. They're taken in the 4th round through the 7th round or a UDFA for a reason. There's a deficiency. They have to overcome said deficiency. And I thought by the end of the year, like you just mentioned, James Hudson has figured some things out. Not a refined product, but a guy that I feel okay about going into next year as the Chris Hubbard of that group next year. So yeah, when you lose an experienced backup who is very familiar with the system, has done it for years, is able to play inside or out with relative efficiency. Yeah, you know, especially Jed's trying, how it was, trying to come back off the ankle injury too soon. You lose Jack, you get Jack back, you lose him again to an even worse injury than the first time. It was a disaster in terms of consistency outside. I don't think they had the offensive line together all 5 very often this year. It was, I can't speak to the total number of games, but it was not very many. It was maybe only 2 or 3 that they got everybody together. And I might
break it down to like snaps, because Jack would be in there for like 2 first quarters and then he was out, pretty much his whole year.
Yeah, so when you lose both tackles, you're playing one tackle with 50% efficiency, a guy who is naturally a finesse blocking type tackle, who can't really use his feet as well as he normally does, adds more issues. So yeah, I think that's a hugely underrated part. Probably that and Jarvis's knee injury early in the season are things that are not talked about enough in terms of just hindering the level. The Browns offense was clearly only going to reach a certain level, right? The when it didn't work out with Odell the way you expected, when Baker got hurt and it regressed, it was only going to go to a certain level. You needed everything around the quarterback to be clicking, and it was not clicking. So if you're then down tackles and your margin for error shrinks even more, you get the result we get, which is, I think, since week 5, the Browns only scored 3 touchdowns in a game 3 times. So it was tough to watch, man.
It was some abysmal football. I will
It
agree
was.
with you there. All right, so let's talk about the quarterback position here. It's been kind of a lightning rod here. My whole thing with the quarterback room going into next year is, look, I don't know if they're going to keep Baker or not, but they got to do something to address the floor of that quarterback room, which is it was bad this year. I mean, if you love Baker, if you don't love Baker, I think you can't not admit that the floor was just bad. And it's not just this year. 2019, the floor was awful. We kind of wrote that one off because of Freddie Kitchens and everything. But when it reoccurs and it's in a situation where we talked about it, you know, this was the year where we thought Baker was going to take a step, right? Second year in the offense, competent coach in the fit of an offense that fits around his skill set that we've been talking about, fits him since 2018. And then, you know, we get this, multiple factors go into it. I don't think it's all on one person or anything like that, but the floor is going to still be the floor. You know what I mean? Like, we roll this dice with Baker Mayfield and he can get hurt again, and then the floor is going to be the same. So if you're Andrew Berry, I think that's the biggest priority in this offseason is what are you going to do about that floor in the quarterback room? Because
yeah, it's a good way to put it, the floor, because, you know, what we've seen with Baker is these ebbs and flows that show you when he's on at his best point, like when he's really playing well, when he's doing exactly what the system is asking him. We've seen what he can be, which is pretty good, right? Which is pretty good. He can make the layup throws, the system throws. He can make some downfield shots, can be thrown with accuracy. He'll give you some of that. That stuff that we saw at the week 7 on last year is the best version of him, which is like a version of Kirk Cousins. So that's your best version of him, like a version of Kirk and the top tier of. I've said this so many times. I hope I'm not repeating something you've heard or other listeners of your show have heard, but there are 2 categories for me. There are recreators and creators. Okay. Recreators are guys who can recreate a scheme that's drawn up on a whiteboard and just do exactly what the scheme has asked them to do. Find the open answer in that scheme. Creators are guys who can, if everything breaks down, perfectly covered, or they get a free rusher or the edge gets blown up or something, they create plays. There's a category of creators and recreators. Baker clearly in a recreator phase. Like, he's not going to get out of that, not athletic enough to overcome, and his anticipation processing are not good enough yet to be a guy who can do that stuff from the pocket a la Drew Brees. Okay. Can't do it. So if he can just be a recreator and just do the things that are simple, what we saw last year, you can win with him. Right? You can win with him. We saw that last year. They damn near got to the AFC Championship with him last year. And then, you know, it's a coin flip. Who knows what could happen? You go to Buffalo, maybe you win that game. Who knows? Never know. I'm not sure. But the point being here is, if Baker is not able to do the recreation stuff, what value is he bringing? Okay. He did some of the creation stuff his rookie year. This is why I liked him. At Oklahoma, I was a believer. He got out of the pocket. When chaos happened, he got out, broke down. He made plays on the move. His rookie year, 18 big time throws out of structure. Things break. Think about it. The Atlanta throw to Rashard Higgins. Yeah, man. He had a couple step up, slide out of the pocket throws against Houston that were phenomenal. Had that Carolina throw where he was rolling left. He did all that. He did Tampa Bay. He had a couple real nice guys. He was doing it nonstop. He had 18 of them, man. That's where I was like, after his rookie year, I was like, where can this go? I was like, okay, he struggled inside of structure, as most rookies do. The game's moving quick. Winning from the pocket can be a little challenging when you start. I'm like, but if he's getting out of the pocket and creating, if you carry that into a guy who becomes more comfortable in rhythm and structure, it's going to be a good recipe here. Well, then we saw everything step back. He's only had 12 big time throws since 2019 outside of structure. It's 3 years. He's only had 12 big time throws since his rookie year. We had 18 alone. In 3 years, he's only had 12. So the stuff out of the pocket is gone. It is just, it's gone. He's rolling out of the pocket in 2019. The big joke was Baker is always leaving the pocket right. And it was an ugly disaster. Teams started to prepare for it. They started to condense the pocket into his lap. It got ugly. So, he started to really try to change those habits with the system in 2020, started to change them, did a good job, was throwing more in structure. What I liked a lot, I talked to John Costco about this at Pro Football Focus, was he was doing well in rhythm. And that's usually sustainable stuff. If a guy's playing well in rhythm, that's sustainable year to year. They see those metrics carry over. But then we go to this year, and it just is gone. And I'm not even talking about, like, I know the shoulder's bad. I get it. The front half is not great, but it's not even missing the layup throws. There's still nothing out of structure, but what's happening is the processing things right in front of you phase evaporated too, to the point that we saw, like, the culmination of it all was the 9-sack week 17 game with Pittsburgh, where like about 7 of those sacks were on him, where he's just taking sacks, either drifting in the pocket or he's holding on to it too long with answers right in front of his face. The processing is the concern, because the physical stuff I can understand, man. You can have some inaccuracy issues. I get it. But if the processing stuff, your eyes, your anticipation, all being in line are not happening, then you start to say, is the mental side too far gone? Did the physical side break the mental side? So what we saw this year was the basement, as you're talking about, is there. Like, this season shows us that the 2019 season is replicable. This is the exact same thing, pretty much. If he played his other 2 games, he was 22 touchdowns, 21 picks in 2019. He was on track to be about 20 touchdowns and 17 picks this year. So you can't have that in this offense. It cannot be that way. You need a guy who can process quickly, get the football out of his hands, and let people catch the ball and try to do something with it. He has shown now, since 2019, we've had 16 times 3. I'm not a math whiz here, but 48 games or something along those lines, 49 games. He's had a stretch of 12 games in there where he was really, really pretty good. Pretty good. That's not enough. That's not enough. Now, you can go ahead and make an excuse for this year, and you can make an excuse for 2019, but eventually you have to figure it out, right? Like, you can make an excuse for the start of 2020, the COVID issues, the training camp. You either can overcome the stuff or you can't. You either are the guy or you aren't. And I can see a world in which Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski in the not for long NFL say, we don't want to risk this basement again. We don't want to risk this level of play again. Could he figure it out? Maybe. But you're mortgaging your 3rd year as leading a front office and a coaching staff on a maybe. And that's tough. And I could see why there would be a desire to move on there. Not that it will. Maybe they try to move on and they can't. Who knows? But the desire to find something better is totally understandable at this point.
Yeah, I pretty much agree here, right? I think that floor is really been, the issue and the enemy of a couple of seasons here, where we felt like we've put a lot around him, right? From a standpoint of weapons and running backs and offensive line. Now, 2019 offensive line was just bad, but there's still stuff in there where he could have done
but this
better.
Is what. Yeah. There's a lot of quarterbacks that find success with bad offensive lines.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to be a guy who needs to be propped up all the time in your career? Great run game, great O-line, wide receiver weapons type. Or are you a guy who can name me one? I'm not saying every quarterback needs to be Aaron Rodgers, but name me one offensive lineman in Green Bay outside of Bakhtiari who just came back. Probably can't. They're a bunch of no names. Seattle, continuously a bunch of no names. Like the Raiders offensive line, not very good. Okay, the Bengals, pretty bad. You got to figure it out, man. Are you going to be somebody as a quarterback who everybody else has to be really good for me to be good? Or can you be the lifter? Can you be the guy who makes everybody good? That's the stuff we're not seeing with Baker, like, in any form of consistency. And I think that's not talked about enough. Eventually, you have to be a dude who raises other people.
And I think the most important thing, because people will bring that up, is, oh, we're giving up on Baker because of this, and that. And it's like, how if even if your argument is right that Baker, he has to be 100% healthy, he has to have, certain things around him, he has to have the line. How sustainable is that in the NFL where guys get injured all the time, right? We're talking about the Ravens season. As crazy as their injury history was right this year, they lost all their running backs, all their defensive backs, a significant portion in between there. They have had some of the worst injury history in football, but they were 8-3 until Lamar Jackson was out pretty much for the rest of the year. And then they lost 6 straight with Tyler Huntley, right? Like there are reasons, but at some point, if you're a number 1 overall pick, or if you're just not even a number 1 overall pick, if you're going to be a starting quarterback, an established starting quarterback in the NFL, you have to overcome stuff in order to hold that spot. There's not anybody who's ever been a established, like, playoff contending starting quarterback, which is at the very least what we want for Baker Mayfield, right? And there's never been anybody like that who can't overcome bad things happening to him during the season. We never had these conversations with Ben Roethlisberger, right? Ben would have all kind of things going wrong with him and still find a way to cook us. Like, it's just not something. We don't even do this with Kirk Cousins or even Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Like, there are reasons, yes, but at some point you have to rise above those reasons and be the player that people expect you to be. And also, you're going to be on the field. You're going to be judged by what you put out there. Like, I didn't see a lot of people giving a break to Odell when he had the shoulder injury here. I didn't see a lot of people giving a break to Miles at the end of the year when he wasn't producing because of the hamstring injury. Like, if you're out there, you're expected to perform. And we ain't got that.
Yeah, so it's a great point about I've tried to make this several times about I hate quarterback contracts, period. There's just no middle class, but nonetheless, like the structure, the general structure is your first 5 years are meant on the lower side of cap hits so that your team can supplement talent around you, and that helps the window get bigger. The Super Bowl window can be 5 years wide. If you're a first round guy, you can add a bunch of talent on your offense, but eventually what happens, and really, I think we've resigned ourselves to understand that the long-term deal with Baker is out the window right now. It feels like most people are arguing whether he should be back next year or not. But the point is, after the 5th year, your contract kicks in if you get another contract, because then you're supposed to carry everybody else. You get carried to start, then you carry everybody else with your play to justify 30, 35, $40 million deal. That's what's happening in Buffalo. I think the same thing will happen continually with Baltimore. Baltimore will sign Lamar. And not that Lamar had a good year. He didn't, but he's been an MVP player. He's been a great player throughout his career. He'll get a contract justifiably because I think he's good enough and he's worthy of that money. So, for Baker, it feels like we're beyond the whole discussion at this time last year after the Chiefs game was, are they going to give him a deal? Are they going to give him a deal? Are they going to give him a deal? Now we're talking about most of the discussions center around, are they even bringing him back? Nobody's really discussing the deal anymore. I don't expect Cleveland to discuss a deal with him this offseason. It's really just going to be deciding whether he's back for a year or not. So, but I just want to make it clear, to your point, what you're saying there is true. Like, the start of the NFL career, you get 5 years. Everybody else around you is supposed to help you, prop you up, get the more money, more money to supplement talent. Then you take over as the guy elevating. Maybe the wide receiver room gets a little weaker, but you elevate the wide receivers, or you take care of the offensive line by getting the ball out quick, or whatever. That's the idea here. So we're on a bad path right now, for sure. Bad path.
Yeah, well, real quick, because you brought up quarterback contracts, I've been fascinated by quarterback contracts and if they're going to evolve in this next era of, like, people looking at the numbers more. I've noticed, like, when we talk about quarterback contracts, we use it as like a monolith. We're like, oh, you can't pay a quarterback X amount. But I don't think all quarterbacks exist in that monolith. I think you're fine paying Aaron Rodgers whatever you want, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson's, those guys who have proven that they can probably carry a team. You're fine paying them whatever you want because they're really good. Even like Ben Roethlisberger, the Steelers were never out of playoff contention because of Ben's contract. Like, Ben's not like an MVP caliber guy. He's just good enough to carry an offense. And I think what we're going to see here is that where you see those bad contracts are guys who really can't carry a team as well, right? You talking about like Derek Carr's, Matt Stafford's, Kirk Cousins, who, you know, he's probably at the higher end of that.
Mhm.
And that's where you run into, you know, those contracts where they become a bit more regrettable. Jared Goff is a prime example. We've seen some issues with Carson Wentz and his recurring issues coming up with turnovers with the game in Jacksonville, right? And I'm wondering, is that middle tier contract for a quarterback where teams used to be like, hey, 5 years, 100 million, 20 million a year for Andy Dalton, is that going to go away?
It's
Because it seems
gone.
like
It's
all the
gone
numbers.
now.
Yeah, I'm
It's
about to say, it seems like the numbers should just put that out. I mean,
I just
guys who could start for a year or two are going to become available because
yeah.
nobody wants to commit to them long term anymore because we
That
get burnt.
that's something I have been talking about lately. I think there was a contract the other day, like 4 for 75 for I forget his name, Vita Vea out in Tampa. And I was like, man, that's a great Baker Mayfield contract. 4 years, 75, and you can have it all guaranteed. And even that might be a little spicy. But like there used to be a world in which like Blake Bortles at the before his 5th year extension in Jacksonville, he got like a 2-year, $54 million extension. I think Tannehill down in Miami got an extension. Kaepernick got an extension. These extensions were built on the idea that there were years that the franchise could get out of at the end if it didn't work out. So like maybe we want to see him an additional couple years, but we don't want to give him a 5-year, $200 million deal. So like there were these, and I was talking to Kevin Cole about this from Pro Football Focus, who responded to my tweet. He's like, yeah, man, like the Kaepernick, Tannehill, Bortles type contracts that were team protected at the end are just not happening anymore. And to me, it's like, I don't really know why. You know, Baker should be about an 18 million a year quarterback. If he's comfortable playing at an 18 to 20 figure, then they should try to make that work and see if they can give him a couple additional years while they figure out if, you know, he's the solution or whatever. I'm not even arguing that really. I'm just saying that option shouldn't be as scarce as it is because not all quarterbacks through their 5th year, Baker's a great example, are like cut and dry career defined. You know, this guy's either a dumpster pile $7 million a year backup spot starter, or he's a 30 million a year starter, right? Like there should be a middle ground where teams can protect themselves, but also players can prove in that deal that they can be worth an investment, right? So it's just, I hate it. I've been talking about it for about 2 months now with people I've had on to talk about Baker on my pod. Like there is no middle ground in quarterback contracts in the last 6-7 years now, and it's driving me crazy because you're either in this pile or this pile, and it's like it's not always that way, man. This is a lot of gray area here.
Yeah, like Jameis Winston signed for like 500K or
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah. So after his 5th year expired, he was a cheap. I think Mariota was like 8 million in Oakland or wherever his next team was. You don't see these contracts anymore that like, oh well, we've had you for 5 years. There's been like Baker's kind of the example here, you know, like, hey, he had a really nice 2020 stretch. Maybe that's still in there. Maybe you give him a 2-year, $60 million, you know, deal with 20 million guaranteed, and you can prove it. If you prove it, we'll pay you. We're going to keep paying you, and then we'll find another contract for you down the line. But no, it's like by year 5, boom or boom, you're done with them, or you're paying them.
Either
So
you
it's weird.
get the market like value
Yeah,
quarterback $35 million or none. Like
it's weird, man.
it's
It's
a
really
weird
weird.
place to be in, and you end up in a lot of regrettable situations when you do business like that. Because again, like how did Jared Goff get $35 million? You know what I mean? If they were ready to get up off of him after 1 year into that, like, you know, I don't know how you made the determination that you wanted to go in that direction if you felt like he was that expendable. But we'll see what happens. I mean, same thing happened to Carson Wentz where he had the one bad year after getting that extension. It was out on him. Oh, we'll see. We'll see what happens here. It's going to be an interesting offseason. We're going to learn a lot. We're going to learn a lot by May about where this front office stands on certain things. But Jake, thank you for coming on. Always a pleasure to have you on here. Where can they find you if they want to find more of you?
Yeah, just the OBR, the Orange and Brown Report website is where all the writing stuff goes up, and then I have my own pod, the OBR Film Breakdown. So those are the 2 main places, and good old Twitter, Jake_Burns18. I'm on there as well.
Definitely, guys, check it out. Be civil, be polite. I know it's the internet, but let's try to let's try to be civil during this off season. But I want to thank you guys for watching. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.